Child marriage continues to be a global problem that denies the freedom of millions to choose their potential partner for life. Understanding the social forces that promote child marriage is critical to ending this global human rights violation. Because child marriage is often associated with religion, especially Islam, I set out to see how child marriage corresponds with the major religions. Using UNICEF child marriage data for countries around the world, I sorted the countries by religious majority. This is the result of that sorting for the data UNICEF had posted in 2010. As we can see, child marriage is most common in Hindu-majority nations, where on average 50% of all women between ages 20 to 24 were married before they were 18 years old. We also find that on average, child marriage is least common among the group of Buddhist-majority nations, while Catholic and Muslim-majority nations have similar occurrences of child marriages. While these occurrences of child marriage are far too high, there is good news to be found in comparing these data to the updated data posted in 2013. In just 3 years, the percentage of women in the 20 to 24 age range married before they were 18 has dropped in all the religious majority groups, except among the Catholic majority group. And the difference between child marriage in Catholic and Muslim nations has almost vanished. So, with the exception of Catholic nations, the trends are in the right direction. Curiously, despite the fact that Islam is most often associated with child marriage in public discourse, it turns out that actual occurrences of child marriage among Muslim nations are not the highest among the major religions. Moreover, child marriage in Muslim nations is not significantly different than among Catholic majority nations. Islam is most often associated with child marriage because it is the only religion whose authorities actively defend child marriage in modern times. For example, even when a child married to an adult is granted a divorce in a Muslim nation, Islamic law, known as Sharia law, may be invoked by the judiciary to protect the adult husband from prosecution and require that the child financially compensate him for the divorce.
Nijoud was put in the care of a very determined human rights lawyer who resolved her abuse would stop. Nijoud got her divorce, but based on the principles of Sharia law, her husband was compensated, not prosecuted. There were no charges against him. Nijoud was ordered to pay him more than $200.
And even when laws are enacted to protect children from marriage, Islamic religious authorities may protest.
Child marriage is widespread throughout Yemen, the poorest country in the Arab world. A quarter of the country's women marry before they're 15. Earlier this year, Nasser's campaign eventually convinced the government to make 17 the minimum marriage age. Islamists, who are hugely influential in religiously conservative Yemen, are opposed to the law, which for them is an un-Islamic westernization of their culture. They often cite the case of the Prophet Muhammad, who married Aisha when she was 9.
And yet, despite advocacy of child marriage by religious authorities, at worst, occurrences of child marriage in Muslim nations are only slightly above the average among religious majority nations. This implies that overall, religion is not the primary driver of child marriage. To test the influence of Islam further, we sort all nations in the UNICEF database by percentage of child brides, from lowest to highest. Then on top we graph the percentage of each nation's population that is Muslim. The graph is broken where there are no data for some nations. As we can see, the data are all over the place. There is no obvious correlation between the percentage of Muslims in a population and occurrences of child marriage. Many nations with almost no Muslims have many child marriages, and many nations that are almost 100% Muslim have relatively few child marriages. While the linear trend for Muslim percentages does show a slight positive correlation with child marriage, Islam's influence appears to be weak. Therefore, since Islam is the only religion that currently defends child marriage, this suggests that religion per se is not a strong factor driving the persistence of child marriage. Instead, these data suggest that, overall, cultural traditions that run deeper than religion may be stronger influences promoting child marriage around the world. Social-economic factors are another likely driver of child marriage. Once upon a time, child marriage was normal the world over. Only as nations have raised their standards of living has child marriage become antiquated. Therefore, we primarily find child marriage persisting in underdeveloped nations. In fact, UNICEF posted this analysis that shows a strong positive correlation between poverty and child marriage. More poverty entails more child marriage. This social-economic relationship is far stronger than the weaker association with religion. Since national wealth is associated with economic freedom, I correlated the UNICEF child marriage data with the Economic Freedom Index published by the Fraser Institute. As in the previous graph, we sort all nations in the UNICEF database by percentage of child brides, from lowest to highest. Then atop this we graph the relative economic freedom score for each nation and let the cards fall where they may. The linear trend through the freedom scores clearly reveals an inverse correlation, such that progressively more child marriage is correlated with progressively less economic freedom. These observations raise questions about different strategies for combating child marriage. Is it best to pressure underdeveloped nations to stop child marriage with threats of sanctions or promises of rewards? Or does it make more sense to take a broader approach and promote economic reforms in those nations? The best answer is probably a mixture of these strategies. Keep in mind that UNICEF data are very coarse and limited. Limitations include that there is no fine-grained data about age of marriage. So for example, these data would not differentiate between any nation where the average age of brides was 10 versus nations where it was 16. If such significant differences exist, we cannot see them with these data. The data also do not reveal age differences between brides and grooms. However, these data do seem to indicate that cultural and socio-economic factors are stronger drivers of child marriage than religion. In conclusion, socioeconomics and cultural tradition probably promote child marriage more than even pro-child marriage religion. And programs to end child marriage that fail to address underlying causes of poverty are probably misguided.